Point of Connections, the podcast where we bridge stories, passions, and people right here in central Wisconsin. I'm your host, Jeremy Castleberg, and today we're joined by Amy Beversdorf, the visionary founder of Studio B Pilates. With a background as a graduate Laban certified movement analyst and a dedication to mindful movement, Amy has built a haven for fitness and wellness since 2004. In this episode, we'll explore her studio's unique approach, blending Pilates with somatic practices for all ages and abilities, and dive into her transformative power of Pilates and uncover how it fosters better health from pain reduction to confident movement. Get ready for an inspiring chat that connects us all. All right, hey, welcome back to Point of Connections. I'm your host, Jeremy Castleberg. This is episode 5, and we are joined by Amy Beversdorf with Studio B Pilates. Amy, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for asking. So I'm really excited to have you on, Amy. A very different perspective than some of the first few guests that we've had, and I'm looking forward to hearing about your studio and how you do things. So why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your history, and kind of what brought you to this point when you started, up until the point where you started Studio B.
Okay, so I started out in dance, and as a dancer and as a dance major, 30 years ago at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, we actually had Pilates classes. I always tell this story, and I have to mention Patrick Strong because we were really, really fortunate that Patrick Strong, who was a certified Pilates teacher living in New York City, a very successful Pilates teacher, and someone who was, he was at the very, very beginning of this whole field. He was trained by one of the Pilates, what we know as Pilates elders, Romana Krzyzanowska. He was a protege of Joseph Pilates himself, and he trained Patrick. I would get the year wrong, but we're going back to maybe early 80s, late 70s is my guess. So when I was a student at UW-Stevens Point in the early 90s, Patrick would come back to his hometown of Stevens Point, and then he would come to the university and train. And, we were extraordinarily lucky to have that exposure.
Wow.
And so after having that for so many years, when I finished college and moved out to New York City, I always knew that maybe Pilates would be something I would pursue someday. For me, it was extremely valuable because I also struggled quite a bit with scoliosis as a young dancer, and I wore a back brace all through high school. So by the time I got to UW-Stevens Point as a freshman in college, my back, after wearing a back brace all through high school, my core musculature was very weak. So Pilates is something I credited very much to helping me gain strength and have a measure of success as a dancer at UW-Stevens Point. So when I left Stevens Point and went out to New York City to pursue dance, what I really missed was Pilates. And I was working all these jobs. I was working as a waitress. I was working teaching dance in different elementary schools. I was doing office work for a documentarian, working in film production. That's a different story. But I really missed movement and dance. So eventually I became a Pilates teacher in New York City and met some really valuable, important instructors to me. And so when I came back to Stevens Point in around 2002, 2003, I was certified to teach Pilates, and I had some depth of experience from working with Pat in college and then working with several other mentors in New York City before I came here. So actually, when I came back to Stevens Point, I thought, well, what am I going to do for a living? And teaching Pilates was probably the most unique skill I had at that point, and it was just becoming popular. So it was it was really, really fortunate timing for me, if I'm to be honest.
Interesting. So if I'm understanding, and you'll have to forgive me because I'm a little bit ignorant when it comes to, Pilates and some of the other movement type exercises and stretches. So this was really important for you for I don't want to say healing, but helping you to live with the scoliosis, I'm guessing, or did it completely heal it?
Yes. No, absolutely not.
Okay.
When you have a scoliosis like mine, which was idiopathic scoliosis that I was basically born with and developed over time, you'll never be fully healed. However,
Okay.
Pilates, with its focus on elongation and core strength and just general alignment and postural corrective, definitely improved my ability to move and stand up tall without any pain and significant symptoms of scoliosis, right?
Okay.
Which, when you have scoliosis, sometimes you have radiating pain down an arm, or a lot of sciatic nerve pain can be common with someone with scoliosis. So for me, what mitigated those symptoms was Pilates. And as soon as I would stop doing it, symptoms would come back. So for me, that was always a really valuable thing. And there's also, if we're talking about scoliosis, I should mention there's some amazing physical therapists right here in Stevens Point that specialize in scoliosis. And I've also had an opportunity to learn a lot from them. And I've collaborated with them, and I actually use things I've learned from them quite a bit in my work today. But if I'm going back to the beginning of my career, it was really the understanding that this work helped me so much that made me want to learn it so I could teach it to other people.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm guessing then that process for you, being able to kind of live with scoliosis through Pilates, I can see how that would inspire you to kind of, hey, I want to get back and start this for other people that maybe not are dealing with that, but just dealing with body movement pain in general. I mean, if anybody's ever had back pain, I have a herniated disc. It's not fun. And I can only imagine if you had that where that was just with you all the time, how debilitating that would be. Being able to help people with that, I'm assuming, is kind of what was the inspiration to start Studio B here in Stevens Point.
Oh, absolutely. That being able to help people through sort of chronic pain only after they've been to physical therapy. It's important that I say that. We are not doctors. We are not medical professionals in any way. But what we can do is we are very, very good at teaching movement patterns. Pilates is very, very good at teaching core strength, functional alignment. And once somebody has been through PT, for example, if they were struggling with chronic back pain, say, and they've been to a physical therapist and they've gone through all of the medical avenues, right? Mm-hmm. And then they want to stay strong so that they hopefully don't have a relapse of that pain. Pilates is a great fit for someone like that. Yeah.
Now, is that something that's often recommended? Doctors have the ability to recommend all kinds of different things. Are they able to write, I don't want to say a prescription because that's not the right word, but like, hey, you, after the physical therapy, you need to go do Pilates to be able to strengthen your core, strengthen your muscular.
Yeah, I get referrals all the time from doctors and physical therapists. Yeah. I mean, we know that movement heals. We know that, there's all these things out there. Motion is lotion, and movement heals, and movement is medicine. You see this on Instagram all the time. But there's a lot of truth to that, right? Like, movement does have a very positive effect on us, both mentally and physically. And staying sedentary probably isn't good for anybody. And for some people, their movement patterning or their alignment, things might just be a little off. And if they can come to someone like myself, or there's lots of people like this nowadays who really understands movement and can teach movement quality or movement principles in a really sound fashion, most of the time that improves the way they feel, whether they're struggling with chronic back pain or whether they're coming off of maybe a knee surgery or a hip surgery. After PT, sometimes people come to us to continue those really good movement patterns. And then on the flip side of that, we tend to work a lot with professional dancers, or even we work a lot with dancers at the university. In fact, Studio B Pilates has a whole program partnership with the dance program at UW Stevens Point. But, the other side of Pilates is that you're helping people gain strength, gain better core support. Professional athletes in football, basketball, baseball are widely known to be doing Pilates today. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I will do my best. And I probably
Okay,
started
awesome.
that first.
No,
I
you're
mean,
good.
these days I feel like people know Pilates, right? Except, back 20 some years ago when I started teaching in Stevens Point, I feel like I spent the first decade of my career just educating people. This is what Pilates is. So Pilates is a system of exercise and movement education that it's a form of exercise that was started by Joseph Pilates. Joseph Pilates
Mm,
immigrated um, to the United States in 1926. He grew up in Germany. He was, during World War I, interned on the Isle of Man in England. And during his time as a German refugee in England during World War I, he developed an exercise system. And he taught the system to people in his camp. And they stayed, the legend, right, is that they stayed remarkably healthy compared to other people, the people who did his practice. So
okay.
after the war, he immigrated to the United States and opened the first Pilates studio, which I think he called a gymnasium at the time. We didn't call them studios back then. In 1926 in New York City on 8th Avenue. The building is still there. Someone still has a Pilates studio in that building.
Wow.
And from there, the system grew. And so Pilates has several sort of levels of what you can do with it. There's a whole series of Pilates mat work. And so we
Okay.
at Studio B Pilates, we offer Pilates mat classes. Joseph Pilates developed several pieces of equipment. The most famous is probably a machine called the Reformer. And the
Okay.
Reformer works with spring tension. So you have springs. This is where I wish I was at my studio. I could just show you. But we have, the Reformer has springs that are attached to a frame. And then there's like a mat or a bed, if you would, that you lay on. And you can press in and out from the frame. The spring tension allows you to work both with and against the resistance. So the end result is that when you're working with springs like this, it creates a sense of tensegrity in the body, sort of an oppositional pull, if you would, for the musculature. So you're teaching the body somewhat intuitively, even you're teaching the body to feel this sense of length and elongation. Many of my clients, when they do a session on the Reformer, they stand up and they're like, wow, I just feel lighter and taller. And that's because of the use of spring tension to create axial elongation. Say that 10 times
Okay.
in the body, right? So you're pushing, you can imagine you're pushing your legs down in one direction, but your upper body's lengthening up in an opposite direction, and you have tension in both ways, right? So everything that
Interesting.
you do has some level of tension, sort of eccentric as well as concentric. Everything that you do is, teaching the body to find this link between 2 points. And so you go through a whole series of movements, and you stand up and your joints feel more open. Your joints have been moving nice and smoothly because you work to create space throughout the body as you do this.
Okay.
And so that's the Reformer. Also, using spring tension are further pieces of apparatus that we use. One is called the trapeze table. We have a piece of apparatus that's called the Pilates chair. Then we have a whole series of barrels. We have a full, what we call a ladder barrel. Then we have smaller, what's called step barrels. And if people listening to this are like, gosh, I'm curious about that, I would say just Google it. And you will find Google Pilates equipment or Pilates apparatus, and you will find tons and tons of information online about this.
Okay.
But the trapeze table and the Pilates chair and the Pilates barrels are used more or less when you're doing one-on-one training with someone. And now you can work very specifically. I always say, like, for example, the piece of equipment that's called a trapeze table, I always joke that it's for truly post-rehab type exercises on the one hand, all the way up to circus tricks on the other hand. You might be doing something where you're really doing something slow and controlled, starting to teach your clients to have an awareness of how is your shoulder moving when you just raise your arm. That's like one exercise, all the way up to literally doing cat walkovers and hanging from a trapeze in the more
Oh my.
advanced side of things. Yes, you could do that. So So my point is there's a large variety of things we can do with this work, all the way down from post-rehab, along the continuum of health and wellness, all the way up to, professional athletes and everything in between, right? Of course, as teachers, like we tend to have, because there is such variety, some teachers tend to be more focused on the post-rehab stuff. Some teachers tend to be more generalized teachers, and then others really focus on hardcore training and of a professional athlete type of client, athletic. And we get a lot of, at Studio B here in town, we get a lot of what I call weekend warriors, people like you and I who work all week long, and then the weekends come and we might decide on a whim, I'm going to go run a marathon, and then we come back on Monday like, oh gosh, I'm so sore. And, so we work with that type of thing quite a bit too. I hope I explained that well.
I think so. I've got a vision in my head. The trapeze thing did elicit some images that were kind of amusing, but I know what you mean by that. And it sounds to me that did you have to study kinesiology to do this as well? That's got to be a big part of this?
Yeah, the training program to become a Pilates teacher is nothing to take lightly. It is intensive. It took me about 2 years to get certified in New York City, and it's only evolved since then. I'm sorry, my dog is barking.
That's okay.
So, dog. The training program does involve, our current training program, which we offer at Studio B Pilates, does involve an anatomy course, a 16-hour anatomy course. So if you figure most college semesters, are 16 weeks, right? This is a 16-hour course. And we usually teach it between 2 and 4 days. We sometimes do weekend intensives. We sometimes spread it out over a couple days. And then we have another class that's called Movement Principles. This class it starts to teach movement. It's a kind of a combination of theoretical and movement material. But it's really sort of almost like a physiology class. Well, partially, it's movement science. It's all movement science. It's all kinesiology for sure.
Okay.
It's a great course. This Movement Principles course that I currently teach, which was developed by Balanced Body Inc. I'll get into that in just a minute. Balanced Body is the company that we do teacher training through. But this Movement Principles course that we teach is really a beautiful course because it is kinesiology. It kind of veers into some other areas of physiology and anatomy, but then it ties it all together with movement and exercises that help to highlight a concept we might be learning. So to answer your question, yes, there is plenty of kinesiology and anatomy that go into learning material for sure.
Interesting. Well, that's all I hear when you're talking about it. It's very fascinating to me, and I forgive me for not knowing a lot about Pilates, but the movement is really interesting to me. I'm always fascinated by different health aspects that you can do to keep your body naturally healthy. So to me, that fits right in with all that. And I love when you're talking about elongation and putting a space between the joints. I think that's actually really impactful, and it allows your nerves to operate correctly and not be pinched off, and all kinds of different 100%. Benefits. So I love that. That's pretty cool. I probably should head over and see you guys. That would probably be smart. So you had mentioned or alluded to something. Hey, Shane's right there. That's awesome. You had alluded to something that you're working on right now. What's something that you can share that you're kind of excited about, something that you're kind of working on that's kind of cool with your business, sets you apart?
Okay. So I started to tell you that we offer Pilates teacher training. So I work with a company called Balanced Body. And in 2010, because of some connections I had back from my time in New York, I was connected to a company called Balanced Body. And they offer Pilates teacher training literally worldwide. Balanced Body is also the leading manufacturer of Pilates equipment. And our teacher training program is one of the most well-known teacher training programs worldwide. And so since 2010, I've been working with them to offer Pilates teacher training. And so we teach the whole program. Someone, when they go through our program, can be certified in mat, reformer, Pilates apparatus, all the pieces of equipment I described to you. And then they also learn the movement principles as well as anatomy piece. this coming year, we'll be starting a new program, which is certification for a Pilates teacher to become what's going to be called an advanced movement practitioner. So basically they'll learn, it'll be a course, which will be sort of like a master's program for a Pilates teacher. It's a chance to take, it'll be a chance to take experienced instructors and give them a little deeper education so they can take their teaching to the next level. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited about that. I think we're in a place right now in this industry where Pilates and yoga and, the idea of movement as an industry of its own, which lives somewhere between, like traditional working out exercise like the gym and physical therapy. There's this whole world of, you could call it mindful movement, you could call it, maybe it kind of edges on what we might refer to as somatic, but there's sort of a whole world, and Pilates and yoga certainly live in that world. And it's become very, very popular over the last 2 years. We have seen the Pilates industry has seen crazy growth in the last 2 years. So Pilates had been sort of slowly increasing in popularity, say from like throughout early 2000s to now, slowly, just very nicely, steadily increasing in popularity. And then shortly after the pandemic, say 2022 or so, it just spiked. It just went straight up popularity. Yes. I mean, my teacher training programs have been bigger in the last 2-3 years than ever before, than like the 10 years prior. And the concern with that, of course, is like with anything, if it becomes too popular, it runs the risk of becoming a fad. And that's, we've trained too hard. We know our stuff too well for Pilates to be seen that way. So I think having, for a handful of instructors who are interested in setting themselves apart from a younger instructor, or maybe someone who's taken this on is truly just sort of a, something that's going to be a short-term hobby maybe for them. There's a need for instructors who are serious about their work to have some way of distinguishing themselves. And I believe this program, which we're calling, the courses are called Advanced Movement Principles, and the end certificate is called, you'll be certified then as an Advanced Movement Practitioner. And what this coursework will do is we're diving deep into some pretty specific things like low back pain, like, how the legs should track, for example, for someone who is really into running and uses, really athletic, but maybe has sort of some nagging knee issues, or maybe, they know that their movement patterning is faulty and they want to keep playing tennis the rest of their life. This kind of training is going to help a teacher really be able to dig in and help someone in a more transformative way, right? In a way that will be highly valuable, right? So I'm excited about that. We'll see where that goes. We're starting that this year. At some point in 2025, we're going to get the courses going. I'm working on all of my scheduling, and I spent this whole past weekend looking at my 2025, 2026 calendar and putting courses and workshops on the calendar for teachers and training.
That's really cool. Now, I want to ask you a question about the big influx that you saw. But before I do that, I want to kind of back up and ask you maybe to talk a little bit more about what you just were discussing. In your world, what does it look like in a perfect world of, so let's say somebody's physically active, they work out, they like to run or lift weights, or where does Pilates fit into that? Like, they say maybe you work out 3-4 times a week doing whatever. Do you anticipate in a perfect world, like Pilates would be 2 to 3 days of a week? Or is it something like you work out and then you cool down with Pilates, or do you warm up with Pilates? What does that look like in a perfect world?
I wouldn't say it's a cool down or warm up. I'd say it's it's its own thing. Not that you couldn't use certain exercises in a warm up or a cool down, but it is sort of its own hour-long class, for example.
Perfect. Okay.
And how often you do it, I think really truly depends on the person and what they're working on, right? So a lot of our clients come to us twice a week. They maybe I have a handful of clients, lots of clients that come to me for one private session a week. and then they come to one group class a week. I have others that come to maybe 2 group classes a week. And yet others who really, like today I just worked with a woman. She works with, oh gosh, I'm going to get the name wrong. You know him, I'm sure. Dunsberg, I think.
Yes.
Is that, I don't know. I don't want to say it wrong.
Is it, I think is it a fire?
No, it's not fire.
No, it's
kind of like, I want to say it's like, is it that fit?
It might be fraternal. Yeah.
Every other day or something. Not every other day, but she works with him like 1 day a week. And then she works with me 1 day a week. And then another day of the week, she just does like her own stuff on her own. So some people really mix it up. So for her, for this particular client that I'm thinking of, she does a lot of her heavy weight training and things like that with her trainer, with that gentleman who's her trainer. I don't want to say the name wrong. And then I'm not getting it right in my brain at the moment. And then she'll come and work with me. So then when I work with her, we work on a lot of core strengthening. I know that she's going to be lifting weights. I know that she likes to ski. I know that she likes to hike. So I work with her on a lot of core strengthening. I look at everything she does and I think, okay, if she's going to be skiing, we need to keep some like side to side movement. We need to keep that patterning working well. So I'll do exercises that will improve that pattern. And then we just try to make sure she maintains lots of good flexibility, all within the framework of elongation, core strength, and proper alignment, right? Like that's always happening in Pilates, no matter what you're working on.
Yep.
But that's a pretty big concept, right? So within all of that, we then specialize into a client's needs.
Gotcha. That definitely helps. I didn't mean to make it sound like warm up or cool down, like it was like subsidiary. Yeah, but it's not, because I can see like just on what you're describing, that would definitely take and be a workout in itself. Like that would be, there's a lot going on if you're working on all this. So that's good to know. That's interesting. And I could see where the elongation, that I would assume that would help with like lengthening your muscles to make them more toned, to give a better definition, things like, which is what a lot of people, male and female, are looking for. They want that nice toning effect. So I could see where, does Pilates kind of give you like a dancer body to some degree? I don't want to say that type of, but you know what I mean? Like it kind of.
Yeah, I mean, supposedly. That's what we're known for.
Okay, good.
Yeah, like definitely what happens is we work on so much on improving your alignment. So what happens is like someone who has a forward head, we're going to lengthen their neck. We're going to help you broaden across your shoulders. We're going to balance your rib cage front to back so that you're not slumping or, then you're going to climb the pelvis. Like so many people tilt their pelvis kind of behind their hips or behind their legs, or they tilt their pelvis forward of their legs. But we're going to balance that pelvis out, right? Then we're going to look down the legs and sort of see what things might be sort of, if you would, going wrong with their leg alignment. And we're going to work to improve that. So the end result usually is that people seem a little taller, because when we improve alignment, we get taller. Like that's how that's how our bodies were designed to be. So I always say it's like, I feel like I'm playing a game of Jenga all day long with your body. We're going to move this in a little bit, move that in a little bit, and get it all to balance nicely.
I like it. That's good. Jenga with the body. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to go back then to this meteoric rise that you saw post-COVID. Okay. Have you been able to identify what that is? Like what caused it? Was it social media? Was it just people cooped up in their house? What led to that big increase? Because that is kind of unique that post-COVID. Yeah.
I work for, I do teacher training through Bounce Bodies, right?
Sure.
And we all have meetings. And so I happened to be at a meeting last fall, and my friend and colleague, Joy Paleo, went through all of this with us. And I wish I had that data in front of me. But
no worries.
What caused it? So the fact that it happened is definitely well documented. We know that Pilates has increased in popularity by I don't know that I'd be exaggerating to say that the amount of teacher trainings we've done this past couple of years is maybe 300% larger than what we were doing, say, 10 years ago. I don't believe that, don't quote me, right? But I don't think that's a huge, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. I think that's about where we're at. And,
that's huge.
My courses, I'll have 16 people, 18 people even in a course this past year, where 8 years ago, I would have had less than half of that,
Wow.
maybe 3 or 4 people in. I've had to hire, what started out as just me doing Pilates education is now a team of 4 people. Another person here in Stevens Point. I have one person that works for us in Madison and one who lives in Eau Claire and comes in to help out with the anatomy training. And so we've had to expand our education faculty, because it's very important to me that if I'm going to run this program, the quality needs to be high. We need to make sure that we're giving each student enough attention. So, it's been a little bit to juggle. And my goal, right, is to do it with as much, is the word efficacy, and I want to keep the quality as high as possible. And
Right.
and I want people to feel like they can come to us and really have a good educational experience. So why that increase happened, I think a lot of it was the pandemic. People were sort of cooped out. Also, the other thing that happened during the pandemic is everything that we did went online. So literally overnight, I had to learn how to use Zoom, learn to teach a class on Zoom. So when you're teaching movement on Zoom, you have to think about the lighting, you have to think about the sound, but you also have to think about how people are seeing you move. Like, what angle should I be sitting at, to do this? How far away should the camera be from me? How high above me should the camera be from me? Those all become things that you have to think about. But many people managed to do it pretty successfully. And a whole new industry of online movement training was born literally overnight. And so I think you had people realize, hey, I actually could make a little online business doing something I really love.
Sure.
And for people who are very frustrated with their job, I think saw Pilates and thought, well, I'm going to become a teacher. I'm going to do this. So that's the educational side of my business. Now, if I think about just students coming into practice Pilates and why we've seen such an influx, there, I'm definitely going to say social media. Actually, I blame it on Saturday Night Live. About a year ago,
you blame it on...
I do. About a year ago, there was a Saturday Night Live skit, and they, I don't know when it was, maybe a year ago, maybe less than a year ago, but they made this, like, if you haven't seen it, look it up, like SNL Pilates skit, you'll find it. And this was a little more recent, and certainly sort of the expansion of the industry started before then, but this didn't help. They did this whole skit where they likened it to a horror film. And they're like, from the makers of Saw and the marketing director of LL, and it was hilarious. But it's not really what Pilates is, what they said, not at all, But boy, in about the month after that skit, I got so many phone calls about people wanting to try Pilates,
No kidding.
Yeah, truly. But yeah, social media has been a big thing, and you're seeing it now, like in every now and then you'll be watching a movie and someone goes to their Pilates class or, or something like that, where that's new. You never used to see that. That's more common now.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess that was my initial gut reaction was social media, because as I go around on X or, I've started to see a bunch of influencers, and that influencers is probably the wrong word, but just people that are more geared towards movement and more geared towards health benefits. And then I find myself on Instagram and I see the same thing. All of a sudden there's more around health and movement and being all natural. And so I'm just like, man, I wonder if that's part of it, is just, it's one of those things that, and I don't want to call it a fad because I don't think it is, but it's just one of those things that people are starting to self-discover. Like, hey, if I do these types of exercise or I get involved with this, I can be healthier, I can feel better. And so then it's just kind of a natural progression that people are seeing, and they're like, man, this can be really helpful. So and it's one of those things that fits really well with Instagram, it seems like, because it's visual. And so then I can see that expanding even more there.
Yeah. And certainly, like, the rising cost of healthcare certainly have probably had something to do with it. People are more interested in staying healthy. We know that moving your body in healthy, consistent ways improves your mental and physical health. Like, those things are no longer, it's no longer like, we know from science that that movement improves our health and our mental state. So I think with some advances scientifically like that, I'm sure that has been part of the influence of why this has gotten so popular, I would think.
Interesting. So I'm assuming then you use social media quite a bit to be able to promote your business and
I mean, I'm sort of I have a love-hate relationship with social media because it feels like on the one hand, as a business owner, you feel like this like obligation, like, all right, I got to be on social media. And at the same time, I'm constantly telling my kids, you have a half an hour on your phone, like to play on your phone, and that's it. So it's sort of this love-hate relationship. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's a great way to celebrate successes of your staff or your students. Like almost every time we hold a teacher training, at the end of the teacher training, we'll take a picture, we'll post it. Congratulations to this group, for completing Reformer 3 or whatever it is. But at the same time, it's a time. It consumes a lot of your time when you feel like the only real way to advertise to your business in this day and age, feels like word of mouth or social media. Nobody's, when I first started in my office, I have this old newspaper clipping from like 2006 or 7 when I, was kind of expanding my business a little bit, and it's an advertisement from the Stevens Point Journal. That nowadays we just would never do that. But so I mean, it's kind of a love-hate relationship, a necessary evil, if you would. And there's definitely some positive aspects to putting things online, and then and then some negative things. One of the biggest issues I face is that I'll have like I wouldn't say competitors, but other people that do what I do tend to post a lot of video of their clients during class. And I'm not in a position I'm not going to just take out my phone and start videotaping during class and then put that on social media. That's really not how I operate. And occasionally, if a client's doing something really good, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to take a picture of this and send it to you. But I would never put anything on social media without first getting the explicit permission from my clients. And the photos I do have on social media, that's from, we've done over the years, we've done a couple different photo shoots where it's a lot of my clients and a lot of my friends. And I just say, like, can we get together and have a photo shoot? And will you let me put your picture on social media? And of course they do. But my average clients in class, I would totally take away from the experience, in my opinion, if I just started videotaping them and then that landed on social media. But so I don't know. I look at some of these larger studios, and I'm sure the teacher themselves isn't videotaping. They probably have an assistant who starts videotaping.
Sure.
But for me, that part of it is a challenge. Like, because it's so visual, social media, how do you get like good quality, like quote unquote authentic, visual images of your classes without sort of violating people's comfort level? And a lot of my clients, if I said, hey, can I video some of this part of class and put it on social media, they'd probably say, sure, fine. But knowing our clients here in Siemens, deep down, I don't know if they'd really want that out there. So, I feel like there's that aspect of it that I think you have to be really careful and mindful of when you're posting anything, of course.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that too, because when for our side business, when I do the ice cream truck, we always kind of curate a lot of those things too, and I always want to be respectful. Like when we go to a wedding, I don't just take pictures of the wedding and then post them all over, because that's not my place to share a fairly intimate setting with the general public. And so I've always worried about that as well. Like that's why a lot of the time when we do a reel, it's all staged, because I don't want to have a customer all of a sudden be offended that you put them in. And that's as simple as something as ice cream. We're not doing something more, I don't want to say intimate, but it's, it's somebody's personal, like you don't necessarily want that shared all over the place. I can totally understand what you're saying. And that was kind of what I was curious about. So now every time you want to make a video, you've got to bring in your friends. You've got to curate it, because you don't want to expose somebody to something they're not comfortable with.
Right. I mean, especially when you think about, women are wearing tank tops and leggings,
Yep.
and it is kind of and aside from any comfort
Private is
level
probably a better
issue,
way.
yeah, it can be, but aside from any comfort level issue, I think there's also just the issue that it takes away from class, right? If they're
Yes.
there to be part of a class, I don't want them all of a sudden wondering, well, what part of me is getting videotaped right now? Because that, they're not paying for that. And that's not that's not the
Correct.
experience I want them to have. So, we have apprentices and a couple interns working for us. And I feel like
Wow.
that's a good thing for them to do, is for me to say, hey, can we take a day and let's create a little video, and maybe we're going to explain this exercise. And so we've just started
Sure.
working on some of that, but yeah,
Cool.
part of it.
Yeah, and I'd like you to expand on, I know you told me off air about some of the things you're using AI for with social
Mm-hmm.
media. That could be helpful for some other businesses, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about that.
Right. So I just noticed I use GoDaddy for my website. And when I
Okay.
logged in to make some updates to my website, it said, look at our AI social media tool. And I clicked on it out of curiosity. And it said, we've taken the pictures, like basically GoDaddy took pictures that I already had sort of dumped in a file from my website. And they've made a whole series of Instagram posts that I could choose to use if I want to or not. In addition, they, through their AI tool, made a whole calendar, like a social media calendar for me. I didn't even know that existed until the other day when I happened to log into it. So I did try one, and I was like, okay. And then I
Interesting.
tweaked it a little bit, because I'm not convinced that AI really understands fully the ins and outs of my business personally,
That's very fair.
So there's always a few tweaks, but it helps get you started, and it saves some
Yeah.
time, So in that regard, I was like, oh, I could get behind this. It could be helpful. I don't think I could just blindly say, okay, AI, go do it,
Right.
because the AI has not yet figured out. AI might even know a little bit about Pilates, but they don't know about Pilates in a mid-sized college town, say,
Right.
and that
Yeah, for
changes
sure.
things a little bit. So so I had to put some tweaks on it, but it was helpful. It's been helpful. For sure.
Well, the reason I bring that up is I just found it when you mentioned that you were using it. I was like, wow, that's really interesting that, in your industry, you wouldn't think AI, but it's a good reminder that you can use it to tweak different aspects of your business in no matter what you do. I mean, that's
Right.
the interesting part about it. Yeah.
Right. And like I wrote a paragraph to update something on my website, and I was, it's time consuming, right? When you write your website, because you
Yes.
want the
Oh my
language to
goodness.
be, to be grammatically correct. You want it to be concise and all of that. And I actually really enjoy writing. I truly do. But I took my little paragraph and ran it through like some AI grammatical corrector, not saying that right at all. But and it popped it out with very much the same. It just picked up a little errors here and there. And that part was, I think, really helpful too.
Yeah. Big time saver. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. And here's the thing about AI is as we talk about AI, we probably will get tripped up quite a bit because it's a new language. Like even understanding how to talk about AI is something new, I think, for many of us.
Totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to change gears on you a little bit here. We've talked a lot about your business, obviously very successful business. You've been doing it for how many years now? Almost 20?
Okay. So I've been teaching Pilates for 25 years. I started teaching in the year 2000. So that's always easy to remember. Studio B Pilates was founded in 2004. So
2004. So you're actually 21.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Last year was 20 years. Yeah.
That is awesome. So you obviously have a lot of wisdom to be able to give to somebody that's looking to start their own business. And now this might, you can come at it from the field that you're in or just in general. What advice would you give to somebody that is looking to start their own business?
All right. So any measure of success that I've had is 100% been because I love what I do and I'm really passionate about this work. And I think starting a business is certainly not a piece of cake. I started a business because there was really nothing else for me to do. Like I didn't want to teach Pilates at the YMCA. That wasn't, and I
Yep.
love the YMCA. This is a wonderful
Sure.
organization. But I wanted someplace that could put a little stronger focus on Pilates as a method and not have it just be one thing within everything else. So I wasn't going to go
Sure.
to the Y. You know, I started teaching in my home at first, in my basement. It was when it was getting to the point where there's just too much happening under one roof. I wanted to grow my business, and I wanted my kids to have a playroom, you know. So I had to get the studio out of my house, and that's really when I started to take the business side of things more seriously. So that was,
Okay.
2004 that I founded Studio B Pilates. My husband, who's an insurance guy, said, "All right, Amy, you're having like 20 people come in and out of this house every week. You need to create a limited liability company because
He's thinking about risk. He's like, risk.
Right. He's like, all it takes is someone to slip on their driveway." So,
Not wrong.
so that was when I started an LLC, but really it came out of the need to have and desire really to have a job that wasn't something outside of my field. I wanted to teach movement.
That's cool.
And I was teaching the whole time. I was teaching dance, and I've taught at several universities over the years, Madison, UW Stevens Point especially, and Lawrence University. And, so I kind of had these side gigs going with dance teaching, and which relates so much to Pilates, of course. But the thing that always helped me, it checked every box for me. I could have a flexible schedule. I could create a culture around this work the way I saw fit and not have to be, told
Love that.
how Pilates should be seen in the community. I felt like I know this work pretty well. I can create the culture for myself. And also it allowed me to decide how much you have a little bit of control over your income when you own your own business. If you have expenses coming up, you put yourself on the schedule more, something like that. But,
right.
You are a little more in control of your own income. And I think any person who goes to start a business, that has to be part of their desire to do so. But,
yeah.
I can never be laid off or fired. Put it that way. But,
job security.
Well, maybe to a point, as much as my clients want to come and see me. But
there you go.
But anyways, it was really sort of out of a need to do it, but always felt extremely. I think you combine passion with need, and that's what it takes to start a business. I think if you have something you really love to do, and you really need to work or want to work, if that's like a deep desire for you, is to have a career, and then you have something you really love to do. To me, that's a good mix for an entrepreneur. So I have zero business training. I started this with like a handful of tidbits of advice from my husband and some family members, but I've really done this pretty much entirely by trial and error. And I started very small and just sort of grew organically. Like I started in my business, or in my basement. I started in my basement and then found a need to expand. And then I was really lucky that the two physical therapists at Scoliosis Rehab knew my work and said, "Hey, why don't you come and work in our space for a while?" And I did that, and I learned a ton working with Beth Jansen and Patty Orthwin at Scoliosis Rehab. Talk about amazing movement professionals. They know their stuff tremendously. And so I worked there for about 3 years. And then in 2009, I went into my current space at 1217 Water Street, and we have been there since. And just this past year, I expanded into a second room in that space. So now we have a upstairs and a downstairs studio space.
Okay.
But I have had to learn the hard way too. I mean, there was definitely, I started doing teacher training because I connected with Balanced Body, who's in California, and started offering teacher trainings. And then I got a call one day in 2011 from the state of Wisconsin saying, "You're not licensed to be, you're not licensed as a school for higher education in the state of Wisconsin. So what you're doing is illegal." I mean, I sat in my office and cried. It felt very overwhelming to go through, but I figured it out. We went through the process, and we got licensed to now. So we are officially, as in the eyes of the state, we are a vocational school. But
I did not
yeah,
know that.
fun fact: we are a Pilates studio and a vocational school. Such
Hmm.
as so would like Plover Yoga. They would have had to have gone through the same thing because they offer a teacher training program. So any yoga studio or Pilates studio or even a massage therapy school has to go through the same program that I do. We're yoga teacher trainers, Pilates teacher trainers, and massage teacher trainers are lumped into the same category in the eyes of the state, and we have to be licensed as providers of higher education.
And that is very interesting. I would have never guessed that.
Well, neither did I in 2011 until they called me up and basically said, cease and desist right now or get certified. So, you figure it out through experiences like that. You sort of have to figure it out, and then of course the pandemic was a whole other learning curve,
Yeah. Wow. That's yeah, I bet you I can imagine the feeling that you had when they gave you that call, but what was the time frame to finish or figure that out? Was that a fairly easy transition, or were you talking like a year before you were able to say, "Man, we're licensed and good with the state"?
Well, they were good to me. They knew that my intention
Okay.
was not to break the law. And so they let me finish up courses that I had already had students enrolled in. But then I had to
Hmm.
go through this whole process before I could schedule any more courses. So
Oh my
um,
gosh.
I want to say it was like 6 months. So they have to
Wow.
do a school visit. So they basically had to come to my studio. They have to make sure that you're up to code, things like that,
Hmm.
like sort of logistically, make sure the space is safe. They have to make sure that, the people teaching in the program are trained adequately to be able to process this information. And then a lot of logistical things like, do you have a refund policy? Do you have the right kind of
Hmm.
insurance? Things like that are all part of the process of being approved is what they call it. They have to approve you. So yeah, that was interesting for sure. But it's
Wow.
good to know. So like anyone listening to this, if you are a yoga teacher, a Pilates teacher who might want to start a teacher training program, I would say, contact the Department of Professional Services. Wisconsin is, I
There
believe,
you
what
go.
we are through.
Boy, I tell you, when they came in and made sure you had the right insurance, that was the first big test for Shane right there. Did he do the right
Oh my
insurance?
gosh, I was perfectly insured.
I figured he does a good job. So that's awesome. Very cool. So that kind of leads me then to maybe the last question that I pose to the people I interview, and that is lots of people talking about becoming entrepreneurs, and I've got my entrepreneurship class. What are 3 tools or skills that you feel like an entrepreneur needs to have to be successful? You just listed off non-business related things that have made you really successful. So I'm kind of curious to hear what you would say would be those tools that make a really good entrepreneur.
Oh, what are 3 things that make a really good entrepreneur? Well, you have to be able to juggle. Yeah, you have to change gears quickly, right? You have
Hmm.
to be resilient. You have to be comfortable with a little bit of rejection because you don't become successful overnight. So you
That's
have
true.
to have some resiliency. You have to have a good deal of dedication and stick to activity. You can't just be discouraged immediately when the first person doesn't buy what you're selling. And I go back to that passion piece. You just have to be willing to learn, and you're constantly
Yeah.
learning because the environment that we're working in is constantly changing, right? So you're
Yeah.
constantly learning about your craft or whatever it is that you're working on, and you're constantly learning about the people you're serving, and you're constantly learning about the world in which we are practicing in. So I think you never ever really stop learning. And I think you have to be someone who's not comfortable being too content.
Yeah.
If you become complacent, I don't think that's probably a good thing for a business owner.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. Those are excellent excellent pieces of advice. Well, good. So where can people find more about you, Amy, and your business,
Well, our
Studio
website
B?
is www.studiobpilates.net, and we have a
It's
lot
a
of
very nice
information.
website too, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I was playing around on it today, and I was very impressed. It's very informational. It's very clean. It's got a lot of great stuff on it, so I really like that. So that's a great place to start. And then, do they follow you anywhere on the socials that you love so much?
Yeah. So, now what is my Instagram handle? I'm going to find it and tell you right now. I am.
You are Studio B underscore Pilates,
Thank
correct?
you. So I'm looking. I am
Okay,
at
yes.
Studio B underscore Pilates. This is right. Yes.
Okay,
Good.
excellent. And then you were also on Facebook, I believe, at Studio B Pilates
Yep.
as well.
Studio
So
B
if you're
Pilates.
not on Instagram, check out Facebook.
Yep.
Do you do any others?
I think I'm pretty sure we have a Twitter account, which would also be probably at Studio B Pilates, or maybe I don't update that as much. I mostly use Facebook
Okay.
and Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't know. My daughter one time made me a TikTok page. Like she's like, "Mom, you used to be on TikTok," but
Ooh,
so I think
you're
there's
so hip.
probably right. I think there's probably a Studio B TikTok handle, but I've never ever posted on it because these are some of the things that you need to learn to ask for help. Maybe that's a piece of advice, but I
There
need
you
to
go.
ask for help for that one for sure.
I want to see the Amy Beversdorf TikTok videos where you're doing dances and stuff.
That sounds
I
like
don't
a
even have
really
it, so
good
I can't.
job for some of my students.
I don't have TikTok, so I hear students talk about it all the time, but I don't have it, so I don't even know what it
Hmm.
entails.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Someday. That's the next
Someday.
horizon, right? We'll
There
see.
you go. Well,
Well, this was
excellent.
fun.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
put
Jeremy.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm gonna put all this stuff in the show notes, the website, the socials, if people want to get in touch with you. I'm serious on this. I really need to find some time to get over it. I think you probably could be really good for me being a tense person. Elongation would probably be a very good thing for me. So I should make my way over and use your services and see what you could do to make my back feel a little better.
Anytime, Jeremy. You can come in. I'll give you a little session as a trial, and then you can decide if you'd want to come in and do it.
See if I can hack it. I've heard they can be pretty tough. So
No, no, no. We do our very best to meet you where you're at.
okay, good. That sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amy. This is very informational and very enjoyable. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. This was fun. Have a good night, Jeremy.
You too.
Bye.